our on-time friends. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're going to take just a minute or so to let everyone come in. Thanks for giving your time this afternoon. We encourage everyone to use the chat. So share where you're from, share where people can find you. If you want to share your website and your social handles. You can also direct message each other. So if you want to do some networking throughout, that's more than welcome. We always enjoy a hop-in chat. Thanks, everyone. We're just going to give ourselves another minute or so, let everyone load in. Oh, we've got some media here today. Right at the Leaf. Thanks, Trevor, for joining us. Joyce from Cannabis Retailer. Thanks for joining us. I see Kayla, all the way over there. Hey. So yeah, feel free, share your information in the chat, where you're from. Crosstalk is welcome. We'll have Q&As throughout, so you're welcome to share your questions as we get going. You're also welcome to share them during the Q&A. Our goal is to allow connections and networking as we share some really cool information. We're going to get started in just a second. When you're ready, Mackenzie, do you want to pin me and then I'll get going? All right. Hi. For those of you that haven't met me, my name is Katie Pringle. I'm the co-founder of Marigold PR. We've been in the cannabis space since 2016, and we've worked with over 120 brands now, sort of on all facets of the industry, delivering PR, media relations, and content development. We're really excited about the presentation that we have for you today. I'm going to kick it off with some Tether insights. Then we have Trina Fraser, who is what I like to call Canada's favorite cannabis lawyer. She's been around for a long time and knows almost everything. And so she'll be with us to do a lively Q&A and a bit of an interview around sampling. I know there's lots of questions, and hopefully she's got all the answers for you. And then Paul from Sister Mercy, our friends over at Sister Mercy, will be doing a presentation on Reddit insights, which will talk about both cannabis consumers and budtenders and how they're leveraging Reddit. We were just talking about Reddit coming into this call, and how it's a place we all need to get to know a little bit more, especially working in this space. A little bit more about our team. I wanted to say a huge thank you to Brooke, Deborah, and Mackenzie. They've been a really huge help getting this together today, getting us all organized. If you need anything, you can message them directly in the chat, and they're really familiar with all of the materials. Our goal is to do a follow-up after the fact where we can send you the recording as well as share with you some of the presentations that happened today. So you'll get all that information coming your way. All right, so let me just share my screen here and we'll get going with the first presentation. Put it on slideshow for you. All right, so today we're going through Budtender Insights. So Budtender Insights is our third year. Tether is one of our properties. Tether launched in 2021, and it is our community of budtenders across Canada. So we are actively growing the community. We have 4,500 budtenders currently that we're reaching, and we reward and engage budtenders through content marketing, events, in-person events, and virtual events. And we also do a lot of sampling and swag drops across the country. Thank you so much to from the Tether community that have joined today. As you'll learn, our community is incredibly passionate and influential, and we're so grateful to have you and to have you invest in your time and energy in our community. We learn a lot from you. Something I wanted to promote before we get going is we've got B-Week coming up at the end of March 25th to 31st, and we have events going on across the country, so it's going to be a really busy time. So if you or your brand want to get involved, or if you're a retailer and you want to join us, We'll have lots more information coming. We'll have virtual events. We're going to be doing some surprise visits across the country, and we're going to have sampling events in Ontario and Mississauga, Edmonton, and Vancouver. So it's going to be a really busy time. It's our third annual, and it's a whole lot of fun. So please check it out, and we'd love to have you join us. In regards to our survey, we do our survey through SurveyMonkey. I always like just to put that out there at the beginning. It's online. It runs from September to December. And this year we got results from just about 250 budtenders across the country. When we look at our survey audience, a question we get asked a lot about the Tether audience is how many are management or decision makers. And so about 32% of our audience identifies as a management or decision makers, which is really great for those looking to drive sales and influence that buying decision. 60% are based in Ontario, 25% in Alberta, and 15% in BC, quite similar to the Canadian population as it is. And then a little nugget that people tend to find surprising is that 65% of our audience identifies as female, which I don't think is necessarily the stereotypical view people may have of budtenders in this space. But I think we all know better than to look at it from a stereotypical standpoint. And I would say that a lot of these insights aren't huge surprises. If you're already active in the space, you're aware of these pieces, but it's really good reminders to make some really smart marketing decisions and to understand what budtenders want and what they're looking for. So one of the pieces we noticed off the bat is budtenders are becoming more experienced. And I know there's a huge chat about turnover and how challenging that is. But what we're actually seeing is that budtenders are growing more experience in their timeline, in their work experience, and they're also aging up slightly than we've seen in previous years. And so I think that's really exciting. We've noticed that they are moving around. Half of them have worked at 2+ dispensaries. So something to think about keeping and maintaining your staff, but it doesn't look like they're running out of the industry. It looks like they're going to what they view as maybe a better offer at a different role. And yeah, most of the budtenders have at least 1 year experience. And of course, we're into legalization quite a few years, more than 3 years before. So we do expect to see that. But at the end of the day, it's pretty exciting to see the experience level and the knowledge that we're seeing across the board. Overall, budtenders give their role a B average. So when we look at the satisfaction level of budtenders in their role, they told us on average 72%. We'll dive into that just a little bit further. In terms of the top 5 perks, sampling has always been number one year after year. Sampling has been the most important piece that budtenders will continue to tell us about. But this year we're seeing sampling is up 25%. So I think that's really great. I think what we're seeing is that that brands are giving budtenders what they're looking for, and they're happy about it. Sales incentives is also an area that's continuing to trend up. Swag is down a little bit, but still viewed as a priority. So sometimes we hear brands say budtenders don't want swag. Well, that's not true. They do, especially budtenders in more remote communities that aren't seeing as much active traffic with brand representatives coming through. Team activities remain the same, but still relevant. And we thought this was kind of that tickets to industry events is moving up on the list. So it seems to be that budtenders are attending more events or perhaps being provided tickets to events by their owner operator. One of the areas expressed quite a bit through both the survey and sentiments is around health benefits. And so this is an area that continues to trend down. So they're down 12% over 2020, and I just need to move the screen a little so I can see her, and 18% over 2021. And they're identified as a key area of improvement for the industry. The only other area that budtenders identified as a key area over and above benefits is around packaging. And we'll see that a little bit. It's almost like they've sort of given up on leading on packaging for support, to make a sale and to understand product. And there's lots of work being done around that. But currently at this point, budtenders are struggling with packaging, but they're most vocal about benefits. Wage satisfaction is also an area that's on the decline. So last year, 55% of budtenders felt they were fairly paid versus 42% this year. Those making $20 an hour plus is down 21% from 2022 to 16% overall. And, this sentiment is an interesting one because fair, living wage is a big topic across all of retail. And then in general, what we see with, inflation and the cost of living going up so dramatically, people making 17, 18, $19 an hour are really going to feel this the most. So this is no surprise to me. This is one that I love referring to. Every year this number goes up. So last year it was around 75%, and this year it's 85% of budtenders are interested in pursuing a career in cannabis. LPs, if you're on the call, I know it can be complicated, poaching a great rep from one of the stores that you service, one of your clients. But they're ready and they're interested and they really want to pursue bigger roles and larger roles within the space. Outside of that, they're also interested in cannabis retail management. So considering hiring within and looking at that as a solution is a key element. And then another area that's actually grown is the area I'm happy as a budtender. So when we first started doing the survey, it was really around 4 or 5%. And so that's grown to over 15. I also think that that is reflective of those spending more time in the space. So if you put 3 years in the space, you might actually be thrilled with what you've got going on and really happy with your career in the path you've gone. So there are a portion of budtenders that are really happy to continue doing what they're doing. If I haven't said it once, I've said it a million times, budtenders are so passionate. Every time they show up for events, whether they're virtual or in person, the amount of knowledge and insight that they already have is incredible. The questions they have about products for LPs is really well researched, especially those coming out to events and attending things on their own time. And when we asked why they got into the industry, 47% told us they got into the industry because they're interested in cannabis. 46 got in because they're a frequent user or advocate, and only 10% got into cannabis because it was simply a job posting. I don't have numbers for other sectors, but I'd bet anything that that 2% is significantly higher in any other sort of retail environment. Additionally, 95% of the community told us that they are interested in pursuing formal education in cannabis. So along with career aspirations and the willingness to learn, this is a really interesting bunch of people. Also, as we all know, forward facing in our industry. When we ask budtenders what they most like about their job, here's a bit of a word cloud. Of course, cannabis is in there, but helping people, customers, products, learning, love, like these are some really amazing positive words coming out of their experience, connecting. And so that's what makes this really unique. Thanks, Paul, for liking that one. It's just so positive, and it's really nice to feel that, right? Because they have a tough job, they've got a lot going on, and it's awesome to see this positivity. Some of the sentiments that we heard around here, like honestly, the word love is listed quite a bit. I love educating and helping people. I love seeing people learn and enjoy cannabis and helping them down the right path. I love the important role we can play and the ability to educate consumers in a sophisticated manner. I love interacting with my team. So this is all speaking to really educated people when it comes to cannabis that are interested in sharing their knowledge and engaging. And as we know, all of this leads to product recommendations and product preference. And so we'll see a little bit further as to why budtenders are influencers in so many other ways. But at the end of the day, we know they are the ones that have the ability to make the product choice and referral for clients. And so garnering that brand affinity from those budtenders is really important. So let's get specific on education. I stole this photo from McLean's. I'll just put that out there. So 34% of budtenders identify terpenes as the main area of cannabis they want to learn about. I second those sentiments. I do want to learn more about terpenes and what they mean. And, when you're having this high THC kind of battle of a conversation, really understanding terpenes is going to help budtenders help educate consumers and help sell them the right product. Genetics came in at second place at 18%, and very few expressed interest in home growing as a topic of education that they're focused on. And in terms of customer questions, again, what we're seeing is like dosage and potency is far and away what people are asking for. It's those THC levels that we talk about. 75% of budtenders express to us that they do feel that the public is becoming more educated, that they are learning. They've come a long way in terms of what they understand and what they know about cannabis. A few other sentiments we received on top of these answers were freshness. So consumers are starting to ask about package dates and things like that that are important to consider. And then we've got strain selection, product type, that kind of thing. Terpenes is in there, but you can see if budtenders aren't yet comfortable having that discussion, how they're not going to bring that up with consumers necessarily, and it hasn't elevated yet in the conversation. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes next year in terms of the terpenes conversation. So just a little bit more here, a couple more sentiments. Budtenders enjoy the education component. They do enjoy looking like an expert and being able to share information as an expert. I loved this one, playing a game of Clue to find the right product suited to them. There's a little bit of finagling that has to go on, especially if people are asking for medical products or medical advice. So I thought that was really cute. And this one too, where at this point, they let me choose their flower and instill their trust in me. And that's something that we see quite often. I know from my own shopping behavior and from what I've seen in store, that's, what do you recommend? What do you suggest is so much of the dialogue. Another reason budtenders are so important from an influence standpoint is that 81% of budtenders in our community talk about their job on social media. We know that driving awareness for cannabis brands has been a very difficult play for all sorts of reasons, from a compliant marketing standpoint, and then also, shadow ban situations and all those sorts of things we're seeing on social. And then also the fact that consumers aren't yet in a place where they're overly comfortable in the same way they are with alcohol, sharing content of them consuming cannabis or leveraging cannabis. You see lots of people posting like a cheers from a night out and not necessarily the edible they had or the doob that they smoked earlier that day. But budtenders are behaving differently. So 81% are talking about their jobs on social media. Within our Tether network, we leverage especially these micro influencers who are so passionate along with their budtending role. They also have a social feed dedicated to cannabis, dedicated to products. And you can see more and more brands picking up on this. So compliantly being able to sample a product with these budtenders, and then these budtenders creating content outside of any payment or promise for content. They're really quite dedicated. So that's pretty exciting, watching some of the influencers rise through the ranks. And also we've seen some of these influencers and micro influencers level up their career and be able to, get additional roles or part-time gigs or contracts with LPs, which I think is really exciting for all the hard work that they're up to. At the end of the day, when it comes to consumption, and we ask budtenders, what is your favorite way to consume? We like to call them traditionalists in the sense that 80% of those surveyed prefer a joint or a bong when consuming. If they're going to pick one, it's a joint or a bong. They were about even, about 40% each when it comes to consumption, which is sort of no surprise. And that hasn't changed. That has been the same answer over the past few years. The thing that has come out to play this year in a way that we haven't seen before is dabs and extracts are really on the rise as the third most preferred method. And then when we look into the top 10 ways budtenders are consuming, so we know what their number one most preferred is on its own. When we look at the top 10, a lot of them smoke flower, and a lot of them also enjoy edibles. And so sometimes there's an assumption that there's a big breaking point between these two different types of consumers. But when it comes to budtenders, they really are sampling and dabbling in many different areas. Using a dab rig or an extracts vape, those are significantly up over last year. Huge rise, and they really weren't resonating much at all the year before. So I think that's sort of an interesting point there. And if I'm a brand in this chat and I'm kind of looking at this top 10 list, for example, if you're a topicals brand, understanding that only 55% of budtenders are indicating that they've tried a topical, understanding how to get topicals, for example, or oils in the hands of budtenders for that consumption and sampling opportunity is really important, not without its barriers, because of course, both those formats are extremely expensive to sample. But it is to say that there's a little bit of a gap there versus, the edibles and the joints, which continue to rise to the top. I just wanted to include this chart. This is from Health Canada. And so this is all about extract sales. So our data is really in line with actually what's happening market-wide. And so it makes sense that if sales are up, if word of mouth is up, product offering is up, that budtender consumption methods are going to align with what they're seeing in their store and what customers are talking about as well. So right now, the way budtenders are learning about products, this is a great shot. I don't know if Jen from Mana's here today, but Jen from Mana and her team with her maple sugar. In terms of the top 5 ways budtenders are learning about new products, number 1 is brand ambassadors, and congrats LPs and sales agencies. This is up 31% over last year. So budtenders are noticing the effort. They enjoy the engagement and the interaction. And I urge you, I know talking to the store manager or the owner goes a long way from a sales perspective, but I do urge you to continue to think about the budtenders that you're talking to when you go into the store, because they do love to see you. Online research, they're doing a lot of that. Personal purchases and sampling is the 3rd way they're currently learning. Word of mouth and consumer feedback has a big impact for sure on what they're recommending going forward. And then another increase we've seen is brand pop-ups and events, up 15%, which is really exciting. I think that speaks to the amount of events that are now offered across the country and them becoming more accessible, especially those outside of, Toronto, or Toronto specifically, actually, for those outside of the GTA. In terms of how budtenders want to learn about products, we thought it was worth highlighting. It's a little bit different. It's a similar list, but sampling 95% of budtenders, that's the way they want to learn about products. And we've seen sentiments in the past or make a lot of sense in the way it's like, if I haven't tried something, I don't know how to sell it. And we've seen improvements in sampling and seen a broader adoption of that across the board. Brand ambassadors, also, they're enjoying that conversation. They're doing their online research. They do like the brand pop-ups and events. Again, some of the sentiments were like, don't forget about the secondary markets. Don't forget about markets outside of Toronto. And then customer feedback is down slightly in terms of how they want to hear about it, but it still makes the top 5. On the decline overall is packaging. I think they've already identified it as an issue. I think they've sort of just resolve the fact they're not going to learn much from packaging at this point. And then store management is kind of a surprise to me that that's on the decline, and they're seeing ways to learn outside of management through the other areas identified. And at the end of the day, if you are going to do an event or an activation, budtenders want to engage with activities closely connected to cannabis. And so we've listed them out here, and I'll sort of start with the least. Like under 20% year after year, they tell us they don't want fitness events. And, we see ganja yoga and all that kind of stuff. And that might be a fit for your brand, and that's great. But if you're looking to reach a broader population of budtenders, it's not top of their list, that's for sure. And then happy hours, alcohol-driven events, we'll talk about in a sec, they're really not interested in. But 75% and more are looking for tastings and samplings. They're into educational seminars. They really enjoy cultivation tours. Farm to Joint here, it's a little bit blurry on my screen, apologies, is an event that we worked on with Countryside last year. And I really think that event run by Abby Roach at the time was sort of the perfect storm of, getting Budtenders out for a farm tour, getting to touch and see and smell plants, pizza, community sampling. They even had a really fun bus on site. And so that sort of was a perfect storm of a lot of the elements that Budtenders are asking for. And that was about an hour away from where I am outside the GTA. So people are willing to travel, that's for sure, to be a part of these things. And then just to reiterate, consumption needs to be a part of the events that we're doing for Budtenders. 85% told us it's important or very important. I know that sounds like common knowledge, but you'd be surprised how many events have existed in this space for varying reasons, including trying to be compliant, that didn't have consumption involved. And I find this stat to be staggering. And actually, this is actually up this year over previous years, that 58% of Budtenders tell us they're not very interested in alcohol or they don't drink at all. So if alcohol is at your event, it should definitely be coming secondary to what you're doing on the consumption side. And to have a successful, engaging event, you want to make sure consumption is a part of the story. 90% of Budtenders told us they are interested in attending events and building community. More shameless plugs for the work that we're doing on the Tether side. They love coming out. They like to meet the brands. They're really great opportunities if you can get, your master grower out or other people with deep stories and deep passion about the brands. There's a picture here, Wallace from Primo. I don't think there's a person that meets that team that doesn't walk away loving their story and loving their family values and everything they stand for. Cultivation tours, like we mentioned, getting to be up close with the plant or even through your facility. Sometimes brands are concerned that their facility doesn't seem interesting enough, but that's not the case. Small tours they're really keen to go through. They like to garb up and they like to walk on through. So digital events are still working. Allowing a chance for Budtenders to meet each other and drive community is important to them. And that's this note here. So, over 85% of Budtenders are interested in engaging with other Budtenders. I think when you're this passionate about something, having other people you can talk to that are similar and like-minded is a refreshing experience. And so that's what we're noticing, and that's what we're really leaning into from some of our sampling events. So in terms of key takeaways, I sort of ran through that quickly, but I am staying on time, so I'm proud of myself. So some of the key takeaways here, Budtenders are influential and passionate. While most prefer a joint or bong, they try many formats with extracts on the rise, extracts and concentrates, I should say, on the rise. Budtenders are interested in education through experience. Community is important to Budtenders, and 85% of Budtenders surveyed say they want to advance their career in cannabis. So a really passionate, interested bunch that I think that the industry has a lot to be grateful for, given our front-facing team for all of us, really, at the end of the day. And just another plug here for a couple of events we've got coming up. So B Week again, end of March 25th to 31st, activating across the country. So we'd love to have you join us in some capacity. And then the last piece I want to throw to here is Radical Femmes. We are so pumped about this event, March 8th, International Women's Day at Saluna in Toronto. I'd like to give a shout out to Sister Mercy and Paul and his team for designing the creative. We're really thrilled with the name and the look and feel. And we've got the OCS as our VIP partner, along with Panther Group out of the US, who will talk about some funding opportunities. So we've got a great day ahead. Maybe one of the Marigold team members can pop the Eventbrite link in the chat so that you guys can have a look. Awesome. So I didn't watch the chat at all during my presentation. I'm not sure if I missed any questions, but I am happy to answer any kind of Q&A if anyone has any burning questions about what they saw, or if perhaps it was surprising or didn't resonate in some way. Brooke or Mackenzie, do you see if I missed anything or do you think we're okay?
Looks like we got some sampling questions already in
Great.
the chat, but we can hang on to that for now.
Oh, I love Joyce. Thanks, Joyce. Let people know about the Vancouver Tether event. Yes, of course. Thanks for that. Next Wednesday, we're going to be in Vancouver on the 24th. I think we've got 22 or 24 brands joining us. It's going to be a really hop-in, busy night. So we hope you can come out. There's industry tickets as well as Budtender retailer tickets. And so we'll pop a link to that. If you think we've got a lot going on in terms of events, it is true. There's quite a few things happening. We'd love to have you join us. Oh, thanks, Thomas, for your question. Is there a specific type of non-wellness event that people were interested in? So mostly in the way of like cultivation tours. So cultivation tours, puff and paint came up on the list. So I'm thinking that probably means like creative outlets and creative opportunities. It just really wasn't anything in the way of like fitness specifically, which I can attend. I'm not attending many fitness events myself as it is. Great. Okay. Thanks, everyone. So we're going to move on to our chat with the amazing Trina Fraser. So we'll just give Mackenzie a sec to set us up. And so the topic of our conversation is all around sampling. And so this is your chance to share some questions that you have. We have some questions in the bank actually that we've been gathering as well. But Trina, I'm going to get her to introduce herself formally. But like I mentioned, I've known Trina a really long time in this space since we started. She mentioned she's been in the space for 10 years. And she really has built a reputation as an amazing lawyer in the space and someone to go to with really all the answers. So, Trina, on that note, do you want to give a formal introduction?
Yeah, sure. I see lots of friends in the crowd there. So, but for those of you maybe who I haven't met before, I'm based in Ottawa. I'm a partner at the law firm Brasso Seller Law, and my practice is pretty much exclusively cannabis based. So I act for producers, retailers, and all sorts of kind of ancillary service providers. And I do a combination of regulatory work along with corporate commercial and intellectual property, but all somehow touching the cannabis industry. So I don't have all the answers, Katie. I still have more questions than I have answers, but always new and interesting questions. So that's what keeps me around.
For sure. And I guess this year has been a pretty big one in terms of how sampling has opened up across the country. Do you want to speak just kind of high level to what kind of the last year's look like?
Yeah, sure. So I had I think it was around the fall of 2022, so about a year and a half ago, I had been getting more and more questions from clients about sampling. I think my producer clients certainly had come to realize the influence that budtenders hold within retail stores and the importance of connecting with them and getting them to try their products. So there was all sorts of very interesting workarounds that were going on because people for the most part believed that sampling wasn't permitted, and I was telling clients, that may be true in many provinces, but not necessarily all. I've had conversations with the AGCO about sampling in Ontario. They don't have an issue with it, although they've never come out publicly and said it. But there was also all sorts of questions about how should it be packaged? Does it need to have an excise stamp on it? Do you have to, sell through the provincial distributor to the retailer and then buy it from the retailer and then give it back to the retailer? There was all of these questions just about the logistics of how sampling could actually happen. And I had spent quite a bit of time chasing down answers from Health Canada, CRA, provincial regulatory bodies. And so I thought, I'm going to put this all together kind of in a memo for clients. So that was around November 2022. And at the time that I issued that memo, there was really, I think, only 4 provinces that said, yes, you can do sampling. B2B sampling, of course, not to consumer. But since then, we've, the 2 big ones that kind of the walls came down last year were Alberta and BC. And I think to the extent that there are still, holdouts, I think probably eventually we'll see some softening of positions there too, because I think it's pretty obvious that this is the very limited amount of marketing and promotion that we are allowed to do in this industry. Budtender sampling would be one of the things that we, at the bare minimum, should be able to engage in.
Yeah, for sure. One of the complaints that there's quite a few complaints, but one of the complaints that a lot of the LPs have, depending on their category, right, is that compliance sampling is incredibly expensive for some of them. And so people have been finding ways to get around that. I'm not sure that any of those are compliant. But can you talk about what makes a compliant sample? Like, what are the elements that make a compliant sample?
Well, for the product itself, it should be basically exactly the same product that you could buy in a store, right? So it has to be produced to the same standards. It has to meet all the packaging and labeling requirements. It has to go through testing. It has to, all the things you'd be able to do to be able to legally sell that product through the retail store would have to go into making a product sample. So you can't just have kind of a product on a trial basis that hasn't gone through a full quality assurance release by your QAP. You can't have one that's not got all of the prescribed consumer labeling on it. It hasn't gone through analytical testing, etc. Like so product wise, you're still going through all the same steps you would to bring product to market, but getting it, delivering that sample to a retailer and to its employees, that's where I've seen some really interesting developments this year over, service providers and intermediaries in this space getting involved to basically provide interesting service offerings to their LP clients to help them get their samples to retail stores. So the logistics of just getting samples to stores and or to the people that work at those stores can be incredibly complicated and costly. And so, if you've got a good database of Budtenders, if you've got already a framework set up to kind of assemble and join together samples from lots of different producers and deliver them to retail stores, there's economies that can be gained from that type of a service offering. So there are some interesting regulatory issues that are coming up with those types of service offerings because I can't store cannabis in my office. I don't have a processing license. And so if I wanted to help my LP clients get samples out to retailers, I'm limited in how I can do that because I'm not a license holder myself. So I get presented with some very innovative business propositions, and they're always a little bit unique and different, and everybody's kind of looking for that little angle. It's something that's new and not currently offered in the market, and you have to kind of break them all down and analyze them really on a specific basis to figure out, are you falling offside anywhere now? And as always, my answers, there's usually two prongs to my answer. Technically, here's what the regulatory framework says. That said, here's what's happening in reality out there, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that's happening that is not technically compliant. And so then you get into a conversation about degree of risk and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Why can they do that? Like, how come they're doing that and I can't do it?
Yes,
They're
exactly.
just
I literally get asked every day, how can so-and-so do this?
And have we seen Health Canada or the AGLC, have we seen anyone cracking down on sampling just yet? Have you seen anything come through?
I haven't seen anything. I mean, I haven't specifically, if anybody's going to, I'm sure it'll be the AGLC that'll do it, but I haven't seen anything yet. Nothing's come to my attention. For the most part, like conversations I've had in Ontario with the AGLC, they really don't care. Like they really don't care. I think it would have to be pretty egregious before they'd be getting involved because, I've certainly asked them questions about like, the key distinction here is, when does a sample for the purpose of education become a sample with the intention of inducement, right? When does my sample become less about teaching you, Budtender, about my product, allowing you to enjoy and experience it so that you can pass that information on to consumers, and become I'm buying your favor. And nobody really knows the answer to that. And obviously that's why we see, as with everything in cannabis, a variety of approaches province to province, you know, basically with Ontario and BC, for example, saying, we're not going to tell you how much, just, you know, make it a relatively small amount and like use your judgment. It shouldn't be inducement. To Alberta saying it's 3.5 grams per store per product, you know, being very, very restrictive and specific. So everybody can kind of set their own rules, but generally speaking, that's the distinction. So, you know, when you have an approach like Alberta, which is very restrictive, that obviously has the potential for enforcement. And the potential to be maybe fudged and ignored a little bit more than other provinces where you've got more latitude. But you know, it would be so will we see that on the retailer side, on the Health Canada side? I think the issue would be, and I haven't seen this yet, is Health Canada going to crack down on somebody who is acting as a service provider for LPs in getting samples from their licensed sites to the retailers and to budtenders in a way that Health Canada thinks requires you to have a federal license yourself, a processing license under the Cannabis Act. And again, it's more of a like theoretical risk at this point, but I haven't seen any enforcement, but it doesn't mean it won't happen.
Interesting. One question we had here, sorry, just gotta scroll up a little bit. No, I need to scroll down. The question was specifically about Tether events, but for sampling events in general, is it possible to have them anywhere in Canada, or are there certain provinces or cities that have restricted this activity?
City specific, I'm not sure. Not that I'm aware of, again, but it's not like I've surveyed every city in the country. It is largely a provincial issue. So I can tell you, for example, in Ontario, the AGLC has made it very clear that they are totally cool with cannabis consumption happening at establishments that are licensed to serve alcohol. And they are fine with legal B2B samples being provided and consumed in a setting alongside the service and sale of alcohol. So now there are a few little strings attached to that, like, you know, if you have a liquor license and you're thinking of hosting this type of event, you have to be aware of, but generally speaking, it's fine. That being said, you always also have to comply with smoke-free workplace legislation. So that's a big hindrance to these types of events, right? Because it would capture smoking and vaping. Obviously, edibles, you're in beverages, you're fine. But when it comes to smoking and vaping, you have to abide by provincial smoke-free workplace legislation. And in Ontario, that would extend in many cases to patios as well. So, you know, there's a few different angles you still have to be careful of and be cognizant of. The other thing is, whoever the proprietor of the venue is for your event, they have to be comfortable with it, right? So even though technically there may be nothing illegal about it, they may be concerned from an insurance coverage perspective in having alcohol and cannabis served side by side, or frankly, even just with the service and consumption of cannabis on site. You know, we've got a whole world, I think, of social host liability issues yet to be explored in the world of legal cannabis. So those are certainly concerns that I hear coming from hosts. But, you know, if we're talking about samples that are being given away and not sold, that would be problematic. Then there is quite a bit of flexibility for these sampling events. And if it's including smoking and vaping, then you just have to make sure that there is an area designated for that that's not going to fall afoul of those smoke-free workplace rules.
It's interesting, yeah, bringing up sort of the stigma faced by even trying to find venues and then trying to get insurance. Like some insurance providers won't really work with you on that in that area. Okay, lots of comments in the chat. If you're looking for insurance, people have ideas, so that's cool. What about, sorry, I have some questions here that came in earlier. Record keeping is a question that comes up a fair amount. And I'll add to that too, like the language around some of it, like nominal fee, nominal amount. What's your advice on both the record keeping side and then staying nominal?
Well, the nominal fee thing is the BC thing, right? That was part of the BC announcement. No other province that's issued a statement about B2B sampling has talked about a fee. And in fact, really the whole point was that there doesn't have to be any fee, right? Because really what we're worried, the federal act says you can't give cannabis away for free, but there's an exception that says license holder to license holder, you can. So if you are a licensed producer, you can give cannabis for free to a licensed retailer. And so that's the exception that we're falling within, is giving it away for free. And, listen, I guess you can sell it, but the whole point is that we want to be able to give these samples away. BC, made this comment in their guidance about a nominal fee. I've asked them what they mean by that, and if they're trying to take the position that it's required or if it's just permitted. I haven't gotten a response. So for the most part, samples are being given away free of charge to retailers. And on a federal level, producers have reporting obligations, right? They have to report changes in their physical cannabis inventory. They have to report to Health Canada. They have to report to CRA. Health Canada also requires licensed producers to keep a record of all promotions. So giving away free samples would be considered a promotion. So that would have to be part of your promotional record keeping as well. Certain provinces like BC have record keeping obligations on retailers who receive product samples. So you have to make sure in your particular province, if you are following, if you are accepting samples, if that's creating any additional record keeping and reporting obligations provincially. So yeah, as always, it's overly complicated. But
Awesome. This is kind of another question. We talked about what can sample, like it needs to be a product, like the product that you sell. But what Cody's asking is, does the packaging need to be the same? Perhaps could they use packaging that includes more information that budtenders could be looking for on that sample?
Yeah, the more information for sure, because as it stands, the cannabis regulations allow you to add whatever kind of additional factual information about your product that you want to the label, but you think you would still be bound by the same types of restrictions on things you can't say. So even though it's a B2B product sample, you still couldn't make a medical claim about it, for example. But yes, could you provide additional information on the product itself? Yes. With ancillary promotional materials that would be provided with the sample? Yes. Keeping in mind as well that you just have to, be careful you're not saying anything that you're not allowed to say about it.
Yeah, for sure. What we've seen some people do is take their sample and like more cost, more effort for sure, but put it in like the whole sample inside another kind of more beautiful image sort of packaging approach for the giveaways. Another question here around gifting. This always comes up. So it says, as a consumer, I can gift cannabis, right? I'm both a budtender and a consumer. We get this question a lot. So what is gifting, sharing? Like, what does that reasonably look like, Trina?
Well, this was the big workaround before provinces started permitting sampling, right? Was they would say, well, I'm a sales rep, so I'm just going to walk into the store and I'm going to buy a product. And then out of the goodness of my heart, I'm going to hand it back to the budtender who sold it to me and say, here, try it. I'm just going to give this to you, try it. And I'm allowed to do that because I'm an adult and I can share with another adult. I don't think I saw any actual like examples again of enforcement on this issue, but my comment to clients who were doing this was, I mean, I guess it's a defensible position. It's better than nothing. But the fact is that that sales rep who's coming in and buying and gifting the product is not really doing it in an individual personal capacity. They are doing it as a representative of a company, and companies and license holders are not allowed to distribute cannabis except in accordance with permitted exceptions. So, you know, I took issue with that. I mean, listen, if you just want to share your cannabis, you can share your cannabis. Like, that is a thing. But if it's part of your job and you're being compensated to do it and you're being reimbursed for the cost of it, then I don't necessarily think the personal sharing rights that exists under the Cannabis Act applies in that case. But luckily, at this point, in most provinces, you don't need to resort to that. Some you do, but in most you don't.
Yeah, perfect. I have two more questions. One here from the chat, and then I've got one from earlier. So Trevor from Right of the Leaf, he's asked, as an event organizer, what should I be aware of when I want to include sampling based in Alberta?
So if it, I mean, it, the restrictions, I mean, is it, so first of all, it's got to be B2B, right, for sampling to apply. So if we're talking about free samples, what steps are you taking to ensure that the people that were receiving those samples at that event are actually qualified to receive them, i.e. they are effectively representatives of a licensed retailer, right? So what steps are you taking to confirm that? What steps are you taking to confirm age? You know, as far as the retailer who's receiving the samples and the producers who are providing them, what steps are you taking to comply in Alberta in particular with the restrictions on the amount of cannabis that you can give as a sample? If you're talking about an event that involves multiple retailers, it would get very difficult, I think, to track and restrict and make sure you're not falling afoul of that 3.5 grams per product SKU per retailer. It would get very, I think, cumbersome and difficult to administer. And you know, if you're in a province where record keeping is required for samples, how is that record keeping being maintained and complied with? You know, again, where is consumption happening? Do we have smoke-free workplace issues to be concerned about? Is the venue itself comfortable with those samples being provided and consumed on site? And are there any hoops they're going to make you jump through insurance-wise in order to permit that? What about the service of alcohol? Are you somewhere where you can do these two things side by side? Ontario, that's okay. Frankly, I haven't looked into every province, so I don't know the answer off the top of my head. You know, those are all the types of things you need to think about. And honestly, if you're sponsoring or hosting or organizing any sort of event where cannabis is going to be consumed, say the same thing to you if it was alcohol. How are you making sure everybody's getting home safely? What steps are you taking to meet the duty and standard of care of a you know, a social host? And
Yeah,
it's not always necessarily clear how high that duty actually, when it arises, or how high the standard actually is. There's lots of case law about that in the context of alcohol. Haven't really seen that yet with cannabis, but I'm sure we will sooner or later.
yeah. I'm actually going to add two questions because I have one. So with that, I was under the assumption that like you couldn't provide transportation to or from your events, that wasn't compliant. Is that inaccurate? Like if to a bus, for example, to take Budtenders to and from your event?
Well, I think the issue there would be is if that is a prohibited benefit or inducement, right? So I think, again, that would be an issue where you got to look to the specific provincial rules about what producers are allowed to give or pay for when it comes to retailers and their employees. Because again, the approach is very different province to province, but there are some provinces where a retailer is not allowed to receive anything of value, nor are their employees allowed to receive anything of value from a producer, because it would deem to be inducement, right? So that I think is primarily what would dictate if you can do that. Now, that being said, like in this case where it's honestly, that if it was just to provide a safe mode of transportation to and from an event, that would be something I would suggest you would take to the regulator and say, can you please confirm that, you would not deem to be this to be offside this particular rule against inducements, because it's not about inducement. It's about making sure that people get to and from the event safely and nothing more.
Mm-hmm. And a couple of the questions in the chat here are like, what if it was sponsored by, Parents Against Driving High as one example, or, a company that wasn't the event, like the LP or something like that. Perhaps there's a little bit more wiggle room in some of those areas. And then I guess my last question for you, Trina, thank you so much. This has been so helpful. My last question is, where do you see sampling going? It's evolved a lot in the past couple years. We're in a much different spot than we were. And so what would you predict that we'll start to see with sampling down the road?
Well, hopefully we get some just uniformity ultimately across the country about the permissibility of industry sampling. But what I'm hoping is that we are moving into a place where we start to see, and this is not necessarily on a sampling specific here, just more broadly, we see consumption venues, right? Cannabis lounges, and we start to see provinces actually willing to tackle the issue of how do we balance the interests of employees to be in a smoke-free environment with the need and desire for consumers to socially have a public place where they can smoke and vape cannabis, right? So to me, that's the next big hurdle, because if we can get past that and we can get provinces to find a comfortable balance for that and put some regulations in place about how cannabis consumption venues can be operated, then I think that will blow the door even more widely open for B2B events and sampling kind of events to take place in a even more kind of productive way, maybe efficient way than we can right now. But I think that's like a really big hurdle that we have to overcome. There's have many really good ideas that clients have come to me with that we've gotten kind of hit a brick wall with. The smoke-free is going to be a problem for that, right? And this venue is not going to work. This area is not going to work, whatever. So I think trying to move to a world where we will have those places where you can smoke and vape cannabis within a commercial establishment is going to really blow things wide open on industry sampling. Yeah. I think we're probably still a few years away from that, but like we keep getting these little teases from various provinces that it's something that they're looking at, and hopefully we can keep pushing forward on that front.
Yeah, and just to be clear, when you say the smoke-free, that includes vaping, correct? Smoking and vaping.
Well, I'm speaking primarily for Ontario. Ontario for sure. The Smoke-Free Ontario Workplace definition of smoking includes e-cigarettes as well, and it captures cannabis vaping as well. So yeah, and it's probably the same across the country pretty much, but that's really what we've got to come up with, standards that would be applicable for those types of commercial establishments where there could be designated areas for smoking and vaping. And obviously we've had little tidbits of interest and pilot projects and things like that have happened, but nothing really rolled out on a province-wide basis in any province. So we've got to hopefully move forward in that front. And yeah, I don't think so. Sampling's not going away. We're only going to see it more and more because again, we are so restricted and limited in what we can do from a promotional perspective that it's become, just by virtue of those restrictions, become a very important way for producers to promote their brands.
For sure. Well, thanks so much, Trina. Really appreciate your time. Where can everyone find you? On Twitter, or where should they reach out?
Yes, begrudgingly, as we were talking about before, although maybe I'm moving to Reddit. I'll see. I'm listening in with interest. Yes, but for now on Twitter, my Twitter profile has my work email address, and I think my website, my firm website. But you can find me. Just Google me. I'm out there.
She's out there. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We're
Thanks,
moving on
Katie,
to
for
our,
having me.
thanks, Trina. You're the best.
Okay.
We've got our next presentation up in just a minute. We've got Paul joining us from Sister Mercy. Here he is. Thanks so much, Paul, for coming on. We're excited to hear all about Reddit and how much we're missing out by not taking a deeper dive and really understanding the cannabis community there.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me, Katie. On running like a well-oiled machine here right at 3 p.m. So kudos here. I'll try not to throw this whole event right into disarray here. Let me just get my I did make a deck. Now I gotta find it. Okay, one sec. As kind of like for whatever reason, as much as I've presented over the years, I always have to start every presentation in a pit that I feel like I have to crawl out of over the next half hour. So here we go.
The screen share is stressful. You got to find the tab.
Yeah, is this working for we all? We can all see the deck here now?
Looks great.
Good. All right, that's good. Okay, good. So hey, I'm Paul. I am a founder at Sister Mercy. I just want to take a few, I won't bore you with the details, but I want to tell you a little bit about myself so that you go, who is this guy? Where is he coming from? Why is he talking to us about Reddit? So I'm almost done a PhD in sociology at the University of Calgary. I've been an adjunct sociology professor since 2007. Believe it or not, and more currently, so I used to teach sociology and media studies. More recently, I'm now teaching at McMaster in Hamilton, where I teach brand strategy, consumer research, marketing. So I do that because my day-to-day job of running a cannabis-focused marketing agency, I want to know everything about marketing. You know, we just went through just the nuance in understanding marketing from just one little tactic in cannabis, which is sampling. And my job is really to know all of the tactics and how they might fit together, PR, creative, advertising, social, retail events, everything. So that's kind of what I've been doing more recently. So I was a brand strategist at some pretty big agencies in Toronto, Weber Shandwick, and then at Cossette. Cossette was where I got the experience pre-legalization of being at the ground floor of Canopy Growth, making their brand. So Tweed and all of the beverages and all these other things that all happened at a creative agency that we partnered with. Eventually they kept trying to recruit me to go work at Canopy. And so I was like, well, the party's over here working with Canopy and Cossette. We're about to go their separate ways. I could see it. So we started our own agency right after legalization in 2018. And we started Sister Mercy. Other things I've done in my life, I've run a couple indie record labels. I've toured North America and punk bands. And for a long time, when you Googled me, the first thing that came up was an article about how I was the most hated man in Canadian music based on a research project I did, much like what I'm going to take you through here, which exposed the way that Canadian arts grant funding was going not to musicians, but to corporations. And so I blew the whistle on that, was on the front page of the Globe and Mail and National Post. It was a big scandal about 10 years ago. And that ruined my music career. And so I had to do something else. So here I am. I work in cannabis now and I love it. So let me tell you a bit more about Sister Mercy. We've kind of worked with everybody over the last 5 years. It's our 5-year birthday in March this year. But we've been lucky enough to be behind some pretty cool brands. Some that you might know, like Shred and Simply Bare. We've worked on a lot of working with like LPs and helping them like manage their portfolio and understand different consumer groups and whatnot. And then more recently, within the last year, we bought an agency in Chicago and are now operating in the US, and more of our work is happening in marketing down south of the border. So a little about me. And then last thing, just last before we get into the Reddit, Sister Mercy just won Agency of the Year with the Cleos, but we've been lucky to be awarded that same recognition with AdCan last year and then the year before with Kind. So pretty excited. Like, I know you talk to a lot of people in cannabis and a lot of doom and gloom and a lot of right now, especially, it's like, oh, I don't know, like a lot of hand wringing and whatnot. I love working in weed, and I wake up every day feeling so lucky. I remind our team every day that no one gets to do this stuff, right? Like this, we are historically in the world some of the first people to ever think about these problems. And even though it's not always perfect, I can see from being there kind of through the last, 7 years, I feel like things are getting better in some ways. They're getting worse in some ways too, but in some ways I can see things turning around. So I'm very bullish still on the future of the industry, even as we go through continued headwinds. Okay. So the thing for me as a sociologist that is now a brand marketer is I don't ever look at the world through the lens of a psychology. There's a lot of, especially in marketing, a lot of armchair psychologists are like, consumers think and believe X, and I don't really think about it that way. What I like to think about with cannabis is how cannabis is really still driven by a community-based enterprise. Now, if you listen to the experts, I'm thinking of guys like Rob McPherson on LinkedIn or whatnot. There's a lot of narrative that is like cannabis is just a CPG product, and the sooner that we can understand this, the better we will be as an industry. And I don't agree. I think that given the challenges in marketing, I run an ad agency in cannabis, so obviously there are things you can do to talk to consumers compliantly in compliant channels. That's what we do. A lot of things that you've probably seen in market. But we are really still looking at other people to help us navigate that scene. And, this because you go into a dispensary. I got bad eyes and bad ears. So I'm just, walking into a dispensary like this, and I'm like seeing a slow moving digital menu board. And I'm standing in line and I'm going, oh no, I don't know what to order. And I want to like go in. I know a lot about different brands. I always have a consideration set of products I want to try and brands I want to explore, or brands where we're going to work with this brand. I got to buy everything and try it. Right. But I get stressed out because I don't know. I don't know what they've got. I don't know how up to date that is. I don't know how to make a decision based on the way we're doing it. So I ask people. I inevitably, as much as I want to dictate the conditions of my shopping experience, inevitably I end up walking up to a Budtender. Okay, just like, what do you have, right? And that's a problem, right? Because we know that, Budtender, salt of the earth as they are, there's a few hundred SKUs in the back, and they've got to make a split second decision on who I am. What do I look like? What are you into? You into a sativa or an indica? Like all of these things, you're trying very quickly to make a decision with me about what I might be interested in buying. And I trust that decision. Usually, I remember working for one dispensary early days, and they were like asking us in a Q&A session, well, what if one of our Budtenders is stoned on the job? And it's like, that's the only person I want to talk to. Like, I want to talk to the most stone looking guy or person at the desk, because, that person probably knows. So we are looking for other people to tell us what's good. I can't just run an awareness campaign on billboards and TV to tell you about my brand and why my product is different. I have to rely on the point of view of other people. And that's where Reddit as a community, I think, is filling the void here. It is filling the void for brands that feel like a little bit hamstrung on how they communicate. And as a result, you've got this community of people that are every day talking about what's hot and what's not, right? And as someone who consumes cannabis and makes a lot of decisions on buying cannabis, if I'm spending $50 and I can't see or smell the product for the first time, buying cannabis to me is very similar to like buying a hotel room. I can look at the hotel, I can say that hotel's in the right neighborhood there where I might want to visit, but I can't really smell what that room smells like. I can't tell if there's a toenail under the sheets because someone didn't change, awful shit that I've experienced personally. Especially as a musician, I've slept in a lot of terrible hotels in my life. And so I'm always thinking about that. It's like and so I rely on TripAdvisor and Google reviews to tell me what that experience was like, because I have to understand that experience, especially given in cannabis, it's the one thing we cannot do is market experience. I have to find a way, because that's the thing I'm actually the most interested in as a consumer. So where do I get that information? I get that information from Reddit. So last year, we decided to do, Sister Mercy and the strategy team at Sister Mercy, of which I'm the lead strategist, we decided to do a research study on the Canadian cannabis subreddits. We did a survey. I did some interviews. We generally wanted to get a better decision, a better understanding, because last year what I felt was, from day one of working in Canopy and seeing what the reviews were of the Canopy products right after legalization, and this is not to call out anyone at Canopy, they're all trying their best, but I remember distinctly going into a meeting with like, they're cooking us on Reddit, guys. This is bad. Like the reviews are in and the reviews are not good. And I was told by the executives not to worry about it. Just haters on Reddit. It's not real. Reddit isn't real. And even today, when I did a similar version of this talk at Grass of the Hill on Ottawa, and had many conversations with executives who just do not want to believe that this is an influential place where brand narratives are formed. So what we did is we focused on the top 5 Canadian cannabis subreddits. I'm sure we've all been to at least one of these at some point, probably in the last day or two, if you work in cannabis. OCS, Canadians, SQDC, Canadian Cannabis LPs, and BCCS. And then we kind of got enough where we had enough people in our, based on like the total traffic and other things, we got 95% confidence rate plus or minus 5%. So feeling good about where we netted out from a reliability, even though this was a self-selected survey. And I could actually probably talk to you for the next 40 minutes about just that topic alone, but I won't bore us with it. Let's get to the good thing. Okay. So the thing about Reddit that I've always believed is, and I believe this from working on a ton of brands where I've gone into a ton of dispensaries and gone, hey, like, what do you know about this brand? And I will just like actually act as if I'm a consumer, because I'm just like actually interested in what narrative is being taken up. We do a lot of work to say, here's the idea. Like, I'll give you an example. When Simply Bare was launched, we went out with the log line of, or like the line of grown in living soil, right? And I remember doing a dispensary tour right after launch in Alberta. And the first dispensary I went into was grown in living soil. And part of the like thinking about where that narrative of conversation really took place on like the why of how that brand grew their product, I knew that a lot of the attitudes and a lot of that idea was transferred through Reddit. Another idea was when we were working with OGI on the Shred'ems launch, we did a Reddit ad, and the Reddit ad was kind of making fun of the Shred brand team. They are a very playful group, and that's a fun brand to work on. And we ran them a meme that was basically like, Shred'ems, Shreddables was right there. And I had a Budtender tell me that joke as if it was their own, which I love because I like helped write that joke. So here we go. I'm like, oh, hey, did you see that on Reddit? You know, I was feeling pretty good about where we netted out there. So I had a hunch for years that Reddit was well populated by Budtenders. And so part of the survey for me was trying to get a sense of like, we think of Reddit as a monoculture where it's thousands of anonymous people coming in anonymously to make anonymous comments, right? It's not one type of person. So, and when we looked for it, there wasn't a lot to tell me about who in the industry, was actually doing things. There's all these things about, well, our brand's astroturfing or faking reviews, are they, on and on. There's all of these things that we just thought we needed to know. So what we got out of here was, okay, so we know there's an overpopulation of men on these Reddit channels. That's not that surprising in general, even though other data we have from cannabis consumption data shows that the balance between male and female consumers is starting to close. And as prefaced by the fact that I work with an agency where I am the only male outside of my son who works for me as a research assistant, the whole other group is women. Like this group here, all of the what I think as like the key influencers in the cannabis industry are women in Canada. Like it's an incredible space. So we know there's a lot of young men on there, but more surprising was 37% of people having done some work in the cannabis industry as population. So we're almost at 40% there. And of that, that breaks down to 42% Budtender, and I got this thing blocking my thing. Okay, 32% retail managers, 22% retailers, 3.8% ancillary services, which are people like me, people who aren't plant touching but still work in the industry. Okay, I'll have time for questions here because I'm just gonna barrel through this now. Okay. Our industry is wildly confusing to people. Let's start with that as a premise. So let's think about it. I go into a dispensary in my neighborhood. There's a Canna Cabana and a Sessions, and I go there at least once a week to talk to the budtenders. I'm a known face for some of those places. I have some people that I talk to just about what's selling, who's good, what's new, all of these other things, right? For me, what's challenging is, again, I listed the kind of like the understanding what's available in a dispensary is challenging. Understanding that the OCS in Ontario has over 4,000 SKUs. Understanding that most retailers are bringing in about 300 SKUs. Understanding that availability is that whenever a lot of those retailers are ordering, unless there's like a licensing deal or some wink wink deal there where certain products are available all the time, you may not get the same product twice there. So you go in tabula rasa every time you go into a dispensary and you go, shit, what do you got? What's available? What's new? You have to just do all of this math in your head. And for me, if I'm gonna spend $150 on a shopping trip, or $50 or $30, it doesn't even matter. How do I know that I'm gonna get value for the money that I'm putting in, right? So Reddit is the one channel that is influencing the narratives about key brands in the space. So Reddit is a channel where your most highly engaged consumers and budtenders learn and understand the cannabis market. Reddit is where our consumers try to make sense of our ridiculous industry. Hey, this brand has this rotational SKU. What flower is actually in it, guys? Or, hey, I saw this. I don't really understand. Like, what? Tell me about this format. All of these things, right? And because there's not a lot of wayfinding, there's not a lot of education. What Reddit has done in as like kind of on top of and beside the industry is made sense of the industry for us. And that's where I find things like you hear about brands, quote unquote, falling off, or brands that are hot now. Again, the kind of the basis of that kind of qualitative decision on where a brand is trending up or down is in fact driven by the fluctuations in the amount of volume of reviews that are happening on a certain brand. So give you a great example last year, top of my head, what brands are popular on Reddit. I don't even have to show you a chart to do this because Right now it's Woody Nelson, it's Tribal, yeah, it's Pierce. You know, you can see it because you see it all the time, and it's a binary on off in that you either exist on the channel or you don't exist. I think I heard a stat recently that uh, of the 170 flower producers on the OCS, 80% of sales are driven by 15 companies right now, right? Like that's challenging to wrap my head around, because you think of all of those other brands that are trying to get your attention and are trying to connect with consumers. And that's really where, again, my role as a brand strategist is to say, like, you can't just, in this market, if the objective is to just launch and hope our sales guys are taking care of things, we're going to be in for a bad time, because it's not enough. You have to talk to this industry on so many different ways and so many different channels. And then finally, I think a key part that I want to talk about briefly is just Reddit is where cannabis community holds cannabis companies accountable. So where was the narrative? And again, if we want to think about this as an influential channel, where was the narrative of THC inflation driven? It emerged on Reddit. It was the first group to really call, hey, wait a second, I don't think that this THC on the package is exactly what is, like, there's no way. And so it was Redditors that started out to go do their own testing. It was a lot of community-driven agreement that the numbers that we were seeing were probably too high. And then a headwind emerged for an entire industry, again, based on one community group. And then that influences people on Twitter, and then it goes all over the place from there. So Reddit is a key influencer. In the survey, what we found was that how influential was Reddit on your brand awareness? Well, very influential for 30 and somewhat influential for about 50. So you're looking about 80% of Redditors are learning about brands on this channel. Where else are they learning about them? Well, they're learning about them in retailers, and then what? Maybe a Twitter ad? Like that it seems like I'm reading Kind magazine and I'm seeing the ads in there. Maybe if I as a consumer don't want to only rely on the reviews of a Budtender to make my decision, Reddit is a key one to help me understand who is coming and going. And then not only that, I get to know what the community thinks about them. And I can look at images of the bud, I can look at the bag appeal, I can learn about all of this stuff, right? And then beyond that, not only is it driving awareness, but it's also driving sales. So we're looking at about 80%, again, to be very, or at least somewhat influential in the products that I'm buying. I will tell you that the majority of the brands that I've tried net new are often driven by, oh, you've got to try X, and then it starts to populate more and more. And I feel I got to put it on my list, and I got to know myself, right? Okay. What are the current issues for Redditors? So we've also wanted to know then, okay, great. So if Reddit is an influencer and they are yelling at the industry writ large, like, do better, and this is what we want and this is what we don't want, then it's incumbent as us as industry professionals to actually listen to this community, because all of the pieces are right there. I will tell you anecdotally from a brand relaunch campaign, if we remember early days, Up Cannabis, owned by the Tragically Hip, sold to Hexo, and Hexo relaunched it. And what we did as when we relaunched that brand was looked at the reviews and noticed that most of the reviews were bad. And so in order for the brand to relaunch and get people to reconsider their flower as like new and improved, we ran an ad campaign that was basically like apologizing for how bad the weed was, using 1-star reviews, where they're people, Redditors and reviewers are in cannabis can be pretty funny. And so we found all these great jokes in there, like, this weed was drier than my sex life in quarantine, went straight into an ad. because that was pretty funny. Or you know, this friend in 2020, so these are all like COVID-ish jokes, but it was like, there's more moisture coming out of my PM's mouth than I found in this bag. I can't, you know, things like that. And then we apologized for that. So we know that there's a good wins that you can come from acknowledging the and validating the concerns of the community. And that was a great example because Redditors, no surprise, a lot typically liked that campaign from what we saw. So what Redditors are wanting from brands and cannabis companies writ large are three things: transparency, quality, and positive engagement. What they're looking for is details and proof of what they're buying and consuming. So to the degree that, you know, a brand can play in that space, one of the ways they can play is, hey, like, you know, there's a review of your brand and you want to leave a comment that's like, here's the COA for this, or here's some information, or this is thanks for the heads up, and things like this. Like, it's a two-way street. This is not a broadcast medium, it's a community-based medium. They want to see consistent and potent products, diverse and innovative offerings, fair and competitive pricing, and better customer service and accountability. And finally, what they don't want and what they do want is, for if the brands that are engaging in that space, they want that brand to be professional, responsible, and positive, because there's too much known brand people pretending they're not brand people, fighting with each other or knocking this brand down, or not, faking all this other stuff. So they want there to be, like, if you're gonna play in the space, they want it to be the brand to act with some authenticity and believability. But overall, the number one source of headwinds for cannabis brands coming from this survey is trust. So the top three reasons, so our survey asks, what are the main reasons that prevent you from buying or trying a cannabis product that you learn about on the subreddit? The three are trustworthiness. I no longer trust that this LP is acting in good faith, and I'm not going to give them my money. Availability. Well, we all know, like, the 4,000 SKUs into 1,600 stores who are caring about 300 SKUs. It's tough, right? It's hard to get into that group. So, availability, I can't find it anywhere. Yeah, you're not going to be able to buy it. And then price, as we know, is like, it's an issue. Trust wasn't, when we did a similar survey 4 years ago, trust didn't even show up. It was price, quality, and availability. Those are our top three. So obviously the industry has done a bad job, I think, of enrolling the community and being transparent in a way that there is trust between the two groups. And what do we want less of? Less THC and terp inflation. It's a top complaint. 31% of open-ended responses indicate that this is a top of mind. They don't want fake reviews. They're tired of unprofessional company reps coming in and criticizing brands and being shady. And then what's interesting for me, and this is me as an agency person, only 3% was ads and promotion. I think that what we've learned, that if a cannabis brand wants to run ads directed at and relevant to cannabis consumers, that's not necessarily like the worst thing, because you're supporting the community financially and doing some other things. So I will get to the end here. I got 2 minutes left, and I've talked, and I'm sure there may be questions here, so maybe I'll stop here. But basically, quote about how THC inflation is bad, and just finally, overall, we don't trust the industry, but we trust ourselves. So 63.5% are at least somewhat trusting of what they're reading, even as they're aware that brands astroturfing is known, it's happening. The Redditors are aware of it. It's hard to prove, but I think brands who engage in that kind of shady behavior underestimate how bad it can be if you don't act accordingly. So that's my talk, and happy to answer any quick questions if you have.
Thanks, Paul. That was awesome. I love the comment on, like, no fake it. Like, We don't advise anyone to fake it. Neither do you. No professional is going to say, pretend to be someone else and pump your brand. It's embarrassing. Don't do that.
Don't do it. Yeah.
Don't do it.
And we've had LPs come to us and say, can we get like do you have a Reddit package? And it's like, no. Like, we're not going to play that. So we're not the right we're not the right partner for that kind of underground stuff.
It doesn't help that trust factor that you identified, which is, become a challenge for sure. And I would like to just give another shout out to that Up Cannabis campaign that you guys did. It was hilarious. It was pretty groundbreaking. We loved it. And it was a great way to take some negative feedback and turn it into something meaningful. So that was very cool. I did see one question come through. If I missed anyone else's, this one's from Thomas. So if I missed your question, feel free to add it to the chat. But Thomas was wondering if, as things normalize and evolve, if you view that Reddit community kind of changing in the way that the weed stocks community sort of changed over time.
The Reddit engagement for this industry will fall of the same way. So I don't know that it will fall off. I think that the weed stocks was like Weed Bros or the weed stock guys. Like I'm been to a lot of cannabis conferences in my time, and what I've noticed in the last 5 years is every year there's less suits. So I feel like the investor class, they don't care about us anymore. They've moved on to God knows what else next. NFTs, I guess. We'll see how that's going. I think that until the marketing regs change, there will be a role for these Reddit communities to continue to shape the industry. I think until LPs can actually properly communicate differentiate their brands in a real way, that there will be a need for that community-driven group. Yeah.
Very cool. And then for those that are just sort of getting started to understand that community, you listed a few, and people listed some in the chat that they like too. What do you suggest? Is it just about some recon and some social listening? Like, what's your position on that?
Yeah, like I will say, like, if we take seriously the notion that Reddit is an influencer, like I used to run influencer marketing for McDonald's Canada, and embarrassing as that is to say out loud to this group, it's not the coolest thing I've ever done in my life, but we would pay influencers $5K for an Instagram post promoting shampoo. Right. And think nothing of it. Right. It's it's part of that budget, and we're going to get as many, as possible. And so I think that there's still, I don't know. Does that answer your question? It's like as an influencer, it's really an important vehicle. So, yeah.
I love that perspective. Like, think of Reddit as a whole, as an influencer is a really good place to start to understand the value.
Yeah, and a lot of cannabis companies are not doing market research. They're not doing proper QA on every bag is not being inspected. So if you're an LP, what better way to find out where you have, a problem with a line because you're starting to see it show up on Reddit. If you want to know why is my SKU underperforming, and then you go and read all the reviews, or this weed sucks. So there you go. So it's almost like it's the most important channel to really understand really what people are saying about you, because they're anonymous. There's like an openness that you wouldn't normally get. If I'm a salesperson, I go into an LP, into a retail store, and I go, "Hey, what did you think of our last drop?" And they're gonna go, "Oh yeah, we loved it." And you leave the store and they're like, "Oh, this weed sucked, forget it, like idiots." We know that that's happening. So anyways.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. So you've got your Twitter handle there, your X handle.
Yeah.
Where else can people reach you?
You can, add me on LinkedIn, Paul Lawton. I will literally add anyone back. But Twitter is where I spend more time. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks so much, Paul. That was really great. If it's cool, we're going to send out a link after the fact. We can share the presentation. So there might be some more questions. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Trina, as well, for joining us. And thanks everyone for sticking it out. I've learned a lot. I've taken a whole bunch of notes here. And These are always so great. So yeah, you can also find me on LinkedIn. I also add everyone back, so it's a good way to connect. And we'll chat soon. We've got lots of events coming up, like I mentioned. We've got a Budtender sampling event in Vancouver next week. We've got Radical Femmes on March 8th, which is going to be super exciting. We've got Bee Week coming at the end of March. So super busy over here planning those kinds of things. And we'd love to engage with you all. So connect with any of our team at Marigold. And thank you again for joining us. Thanks to the speakers. And I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.